All right, team, we are back with the Ask Maddie show. We are going to provide you with a great show today because you guys got some great questions. And I'm very excited to talk about these Cardano, Ondo. You know, we don't really talk about Ondo a whole lot, but you do get that charting on the website. So hopefully we'll get some looks at that today. It is a pretty expensive crypto, so we'll see if it's a worthy buy right now. I don't know. We'll see. And we'll also be talking about Casper. There's something that happened yesterday, Matt. I don't know if you heard about it. Maybe a little bit of an upgrade. So we'll get into that though. But I wanted to talk about this whole Casper thing. You know, I think I've seen online that people are probably feeling a lot more comfortable, a little bit more optimistic. Are you feeling more optimistic about Casper here in 2025 with this Casper 2.0 upgrade?
I think the 2.0 upgrade is really just more of a manifestation of a massive leadership change that we had several months ago. I think I probably felt more confident in the Casper network as a whole since we had Michael Stoyer at the helm and just a more united vision for what we want to see for Casper. So we talked a lot in a previous episode about some of the exciting features that are coming with 2.0. A lot more flexibility for developers, more complex software developer kits, and things that are just going to attract more long-term high quality projects to the network as a whole. So I'm very excited about it. I'm very bullish on it, and I think that this is also just something that people said was never going to come because there was delays. But you know what? Better to have a product that's perfect or near perfect when you release it versus releasing something that requires patch after patch and then people get frustrated and start throwing shade at the project because there's issues or hiccups in the network. So I'm very excited to see what kind of development we get with all these new tools with 2.0.
Absolutely. And I'm kind of expecting maybe some actual hiccups because this happens a lot with upgrades with other projects. So, I guess RWI protocols up next for Casper deployment. So we'll see that project take place on Casper. So that's on tap. That's very exciting. Again, team, I always want to stress this. Casper, in my mind, is in a different position than a lot of these other cryptos we talk about. That doesn't make it less meaningful of a crypto because, as I said it on the show the other day. I think some of you guys got confused, like, oh, you guys aren't buying Casper. Maddie was DCAing. I stopped DCAing because my position, you go in your coin stats, it's like, holy crap, I'm overexposed. I have so much exposure in Casper. And, you want to mitigate the risk. Let's say worst case scenario, Casper doesn't perform like we all think it does. I don't want to be caught holding a ginormous bag. It needs to be even across the cryptos here. So, team, I'm very excited to get in this show. This is very exciting for Casper 2.0. I think we will do a show and talk more in detail next week. Maddie just told me we're not doing a show after next week. I already said on Monday we're not doing an after-hours show. So we'll try to actually give you guys some information. If you want more information, though, you know where you can get it? CryptoCharged.com. Matt, what can they get at CryptoCharged?
Yeah, so we go over a lot of information. You guys get a couple shows a week from here. So obviously the Ask Maddie show here on Wednesdays, and on Monday we do the After Hours show, discussing more, macro topics, fundamental developments in the space. But Monday through Friday, we really take a deep look at those charts. Every Friday, we do our technical tune-up section where you guys can request up to 2 picks per person per week. We chart those live, kind of go through that analysis, teaching you guys not only, where those potential entry and exit points are, but how we actually come to those conclusions. We've got educational material on the website. We have our coin library on the website. We've got our Discord. That all comes at $49 a month with code YouTube and a 30-day free trial. So I'd recommend you guys come check it out and see if it's a good fit for you.
Absolutely. And last thing I'll say before we get into the questions here, there's a lot of products being rolled out right now. Strike just announced they're also doing a Bitcoin-backed loans feature on top of the Coinbase one, and Fold the company just went public. And they have the cards that we talked about on Monday. So we have a lot of products being rolled out right now, and we didn't have a lot of options within the past couple of years, all right? They all got taken away from us in 2021 and 2022. So now the features are rolling back into the crypto industry, and that kind of changes maybe some strategies with some yield bearing savings accounts or borrowing against our funds. So team, I know for me, I'm deeply looking at these because I don't want to for a long time we didn't have these. They were again taken away from us. So I want to be on top of it and know what's coming to the forefront so we can have the best chance in this bull run going into the bear market so that we can leverage our funds properly. So and this is going to be rolled out highly talked about in the Discord on the platform, so definitely sign up using code YouTube there. Matt, let's get into the questions for today. Jim Bob says, is Cardano still a 13x this bull run? I can't see it happening. There's too many cryptos available now.
I do agree with some extent. There is a much higher level of saturation of coins on market now compared to even the last two cycles. But we're also talking about projects and coins, at least primarily on our show, that have something unique to offer. We have looked at a variety of different elements when we look at it. We look at market capitalization. We look at what the actual vertical attacks, right? So what does the coin do? What is the real world utility? We look at market capitalization. We look at listings. We look at a variety of things to determine, kind of like where we want to position ourselves in certain assets. I'm not personally in Cardano. A lot of my team is in Cardano. They've done very well. A lot of them bought in those bear market lows. We provide analytics for projects that we don't personally, get involved with. If you guys are passionate about them, of course, we don't list, meme coins and stuff on the website, but anything that we know has good fundamental backing and we know it's not going anywhere and somebody wants the analytics, we do that for them. So let's take a look at the chart here together though. And I think that a lot of you guys maybe have gotten tired of some of these older coins, but if you look at things like Cardano, it's actually held up quite well compared to a lot of other things out there. Let's actually pull out to the 3-day chart. I want you guys to just kind of look at this structure as a whole here and understand this is, especially if you guys are cycle-based traders or long-term traders, this is the kind of behavior that you're looking for here. So first and foremost, what you had with Cardano was a beautiful rebalancing on top of that previous accumulative structure. So you had this big base in here, right? So everyone had, let's see, the lows were set here. You guys had 500 days to basically buy 2 to 5 to maybe 6 cent Cardano. We're looking at a 66 cent Cardano, right? So if we go from the lows here, Cardano is up over 2,300% from those lows. And now if we even just measure from the 2023 lows, right? So that put us right around 23 cents. Cardano's up still about 180% from those lows. So again, the big message here is just buy in the bear market, right? DCA that bear market. It's gonna give you the easiest strategy, right? So I guess also too, when we say, is it still a 13x? 13x from where, right? Like from you buying today, from you buying in the bear market. Let's bring our Fibonacci's into it. Let's go from the swing high, swing low here from 21 down to 22. If you guys want your Fibonacci's to look like this, because it's a big rainbow mess when they, drop the template on there. If you guys like this clean look, we show you how to do this at cryptocharge.com. When you guys see where we're at with Cardano, I still see imbalances higher. So first of all, $2 is a massive imbalance. And what I mean by that, team, is you see this breakdown in price, right? You see all this selling in here and no buying opportunities were offered. So that means the market makers are likely to manipulate this area again. So that would be a first area of interest that I would consider, is right around that $2 mark. From current market price, which is a fair price, I think anywhere between 51 and 65 cents or so is a good price. From the $1.31 price is down about 50% or so. So it's a pretty decent discount. And you look at current market to the 618, and you're looking at about a 200% return up into that 618. Now we have, of course, the Fibonacci extensions here that start right around $4.80 and go all the way up to $12.22. So if we measure from here to that first target, you're getting roughly maybe like a 600% out of this or so. If we see a full extension, you are looking closer to like a 17x. Where does that 13 maybe come in? Probably a little bit closer to like that $10 mark. And that would be kind of like the 3.618. But again, we always advise for a multi-step exit, at least a 3-step. For some of you guys that have big bags, we've talked a lot about trims about that before that. Maybe you need a 6-step exit plan. Everyone needs something that's a little bit more custom to your needs, your risk appetite, your goals. So will your total return be 13x? Not if you do a multi-step exit, but if you get even, let's say, an 8, 9, or 10x out of this collectively, that's overall pretty great return. So is it possible based on what we've seen Fibonacci-wise in the past? Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I think he's referring to the Cardano video where, the title was something to the effect of like, oh, is a 13x on the table for Cardano. I think that's what he was referring to. And at the time, we were a lot higher in price if we're just talking about a couple months ago. So that could have been the 4.236. So, hey, now that it's down, 50%, that would be the time to crank up the DCA. TG says, if you had to buy only 3 coins today, what would they be?
It kind of, again, just depends on what you've got going on. If we're talking about dressing up a portfolio from scratch, you don't have anything in the market, I think that maybe some of the considerations I would look at is, this is tough because there's actually a fair amount of good prices on the board. Yeah. But I would say that, I would definitely look to add Casper to the portfolio. We're talking about, just a few $100 million here, market cap, couple $100 million in market cap. Great play for upgradable smart contracts. If you're looking at, again, a smart contract play, Cardano versus Casper, vastly smaller market cap. Cardano's at like, 22, 23 billion. Casper's at, 100 something million. I think that Casper is a much more competitive play, especially if you guys are looking to maximize your potential ROI and deal with that volatility. That'd probably be pick number one. Pick number two, and I kind of wrote a little bit of a love letter to it on our last update at Crypto Charge, would be Zcash.
Yep.
Zcash has a lot of the same mechanisms that Bitcoin does, right? 21 million max supply, 15 some million on market right now. You got that privacy letter. You have governments that are potentially looking to ban Zcash, and for me, that personally makes it more valuable because remember, guys, governments can't shut down code and they can't rip stuff out of your wallet. So if they truly believe that criminals want to use things like privacy coins, I kind of want to hold that. That sounds highly valuable to me, right? So Zcash would be another good consideration. And then I think if you were to address an Oracle, which again provides first-party data feeds to smart contracts, which is a very important but not so sexy use case, would be API 3. I would say honorable mention right now, if you wanted to add something payments, would probably be Algorand. Here sub 22, 25 cents is a fantastic price. So those would be some good considerations for you guys. That gives you a good blend of both market capitalization as well as a good blend of different market verticals.
There you go, TG. You got 4 there. Pan says, thanks, guys, for the video. Question, what are your thoughts on Ondo, and what kind of sales level would you see for Ondo?
Yeah, so let's take a quick peek at the Ondo chart. This is actually something we covered on Friday from a member requested pick for Technical Tune-Up Friday segment. So you guys can see that we have a little bit of drawings there, but let's draw it from scratch here as a team together. Ondo, of course, is a little bit of a newer project, right? We launched here at the top of 2024. Anytime you have a little bit lesser amount of price action, you might be selling yourself a tiny bit short using some of the Fibonacci's, but at some point you have to create a plan for yourself, right? Vibes are not a plan. That's not a trading plan at all. And it's fine. Like, you guys can hold into whatever, but none of you guys are ever going to go and like say, yo, you know what, sentiment's really high right now, I should probably sell, right? It's going to be the opposite. You're going to be like, well, I'll hold a little bit longer. My favorite YouTuber says doing another 10x from here, and sentiment always gets higher at those prices. When you look at the first correction we had in here, pretty decent sized correction from the $1.50 region or so, came down about 65%. That's a very healthy correction. Even in this last correction here from December of 24, pull back about 68%. So 2 very healthy corrections. I do like that as a whole. When you look at kind of the floor of support that's been established here, we've respected this floor of support. In fact, we're establishing a higher low. So big double bottom here in September, and again here in November 24, right around that 58 cent, 60 cent region. We did technically throw a wick towards 50 cents here, but most of those candle body closes are kind of in that 60 cent region. So we are building a floor of support in here. I do like the way that it looks. Rejected that 50 week recently here and kind of just really sitting just very tediously on that 50-day moving average. If you lose that, then we're probably back down towards 75 cents. We can pull a couple fib ranges into this, right? Because we have the correction structure here from August 24, and then again here in December through early 2025. So let's do both ranges, so that way you guys can kind of see what kind of conflicts maybe you have out there. So you guys can see from that last range, we actually nailed perfectly to perfection a 1.618 at $2.08. Pulled back. We are respecting that 236, interestingly enough, right? From that previous crashing structure, that's the 236 in there being respected. And we would see potentially upwards of maybe $3 to $4.60 as those next targets, right? So that gives us maybe a 250% upwards of maybe a 400% reward. Now, of course, you guys can always look at deeper into this Fib sequence. The Fib sequence goes on forever. It's not a complicated math sequence. And you guys can use some of these as upper targets here, but let's see if there's any overlap or confluence. So let's remember, guys, we have 3, let's call it 450, 460 here. Let's strip this away and let's go from our new range here. Let's go from December down to these lows. And we can see that we get somewhere between 450 as that next target, and upwards of like $6 to $7. So I'd probably be using this personally as my plan here to potentially take some profits off the table from current market. You've got about 250% up to that next target there, 420, just like we saw up to that 450 mark. And then those final targets give us upwards of like a 6 to almost a 7x in that $6 to $7 region. Of course, can it go further? Can it go higher? Yes, but we should be doing some sort of layer out. And then if you want to keep something as part of a moon bag, fine. But let's not go up to these crazy extensions and go, well, the extension does say 31, 51, or 82. So I'm not going to take profit till there. Let's make sure we take what's in front of us, and then we can always reinvest if we see a higher low established.
Quick thing here, Matt. It struck the 1618, and that would be TP1 for us if we were actually going with the plan. But look how quick it went up. In a month and a half, it went from some very low prices up to TP1. So it happens very fast there. Yeah,
that's right. Yeah, it was like a little over 30 days, right? That it took us to get from this low over here in November up into that high. So to your point, Gavin, like the goal here, guys, is to buy these accumulative structures and then take your foot completely off the gas when you see those impulses, and then just reap the reward.
One more other thing, Matt. So I saw like, okay, so this is a different chart than what we see, with crypto charts. It really depends on when they launch. If they're launching in a bull run, they're going to perform well. If they launch within a bear market, you're going to see that crashing structure. Could you see 32 cents again on this Ondo chart?
I would say that there is some minor imbalance that got left behind over by this double top here. We really spent very little amount of time here, kind of in that 30-cent region. We topped again. We did break out. So I would agree that there was imbalance left behind. The lowest that we came in this instance was kind of close to like that 36-cent region. I think if everything crumbled down and let's say we saw a very low high established, let's say like $3 or $4, yeah, maybe in the bear market and things get nasty, you could see 36 cents again. But I say that this floor of support in here, kind of around that 57-cent mark, 60-cent mark, is a very clean floor, at least as of right now, from what we've seen historically as far as, the 3-day chart here, multiple days of price action closing.
Yeah, this is going to be an interesting chart to look back upon when we enter, a very bearish period and see how this chart performs because, this is very different than the other. Every time I think of like, Pulse Bull Run, we're thinking about the Casper chart. When we think about the big getting into it, like I think about the Polkadot chart, it had a crashing structure, but it just went straight up into a bull run and it performed super well. So this is just one of those charts. And honestly, team, this feels super risky for me personally. Like when you look at charts, we were talking about the Hedera chart the other day. That feels super risky to me. You know what doesn't feel super risky? The Sushi, the Filecoin, the Zcash charts right now. I know Zcash is very different in a different structure than those other two, but still within deep value zones. So, hey, do whatever you guys want to do. Simply says, how should I buy right now? How should I buy right now be conducted considering mass volatility? With a T
I
at the
had a
end.
little bit of an aneurysm reading that one there. What should you buy right now, considering the massive volatility? As I'm going to guess the cleaner way that you intended to write this. And I know that we've got viewers in other countries too that maybe don't have the best English skills, so we'll go ahead and give you the benefit of the doubt on that one. I think we covered a lot of assets that have some great opportunity. A lot of it's going to depend on your guys' risk appetite, what your existing portfolio looks like. And I know that's sometimes like boring or maybe like frustrating advice to get, but it truly is because on cryptocharge.com, we give you guys like that 3-step exit plan. We give you guys parameters for, is this a DCA? Is this a limit-based order? Is it one? Is it the other? Or are there both parameters? But sometimes even those parameters won't apply to you if let's say you have like a 50-cent average on XRP and we say that you could add it at $1.33 on XRP. That probably doesn't apply to you, right? That's more to someone who doesn't have an XRP position. So it always comes down to that. And like Gavin also mentioned at the top here, rebalancing is also a very important part here. It's not just so much about strictly about your averages. It's about how weighted am I in certain projects versus others. We don't want to see our position balloon to 70 or 80% of our portfolio and then kind of just overtake the other opportunities out there. So again, consistent investor strategy, I always suggest like 8 to 12 being the top. If you guys have a very small amount of money and you want to do that daily DCA, I would say look at maybe 3 or 4 max to get started. And if your portfolio develops nicely and you like the way it looks, you guys can always add to that. We mentioned 3 or 4 assets at the top here you could absolutely get involved with. I still really like a variety of others in here as well. I think VeChain's even a decent price right now, even though it's not something I've added to as of recent. It's still kind of down there at the lows, offering decent risk to reward. Sushi is an absolute stellar pick right now. My DCA right now is comprised of basically API 3, Sushi, and Filecoin. That's kind of where my focus is. So there's a lot of opportunity out there. Maybe also just take a look at some of the verticals and see what piques your interest, because all these projects attack different things. They're not all just a blockchain. They're all not just for payments. They're all just crypto does not have this blanket term. There's a lot of DLT solutions that attack very different different problems with a lot of different mechanisms that are some are faster, some are slower, and have different partnerships all along the way. So you got to do some research. I definitely recommend checking out cryptocharge.com at the consistent investor strategy if you guys are looking to build a portfolio from scratch. It's a really great tool that's under 50 minutes that will give you a lot of insights when it comes to allocation, 5 or 6 different strategies for buying based on market conditions, how to store our favorite exchanges, and then determining long-term holds. So I would recommend you guys check that out if these kind of questions are coming to you. That's the kind of educational videos that allow you to go back to those and kind of just plug and play your personal scenario into them and make some decisions for yourself.
Skylar says, can we be sure that this upgrade in Casper will change the trajectory?
I mean, I don't really understand the question, I guess. The trajectory of what? Of price? I mean, we actually had a pop in price well ahead of 2.0 launch, and we're,
Yeah.
above a penny now, which, starts to kind of put us towards some of that previous price action where we've seen market makers manipulate between 1 and 1.3 pennies. So we're kind of back in a little bit more of a liquid pocket above 1 penny. Like I mentioned at the top, with the 2.0 upgrade, there are a lot of mechanisms that are going to allow developers to do much more complex things without changing things on a protocol level. Does that change the trajectory of what people can do on the network, today compared to a week ago? Yeah, absolutely. But they're tools, right? It's just a very complex toolbox, right? You can go and you can buy the best tools in the world, right? You can go and buy 100 Snap-on tools. Yeah, they're going to be fantastic, but if you don't know anything about working on cars or whatever, the tools are useless to you. So the tools are only as useful as the developers that build on it, and that's true of any project, right? You look at ETH is actually not even necessarily, I would say, the best project out there. They just had first mover advantage, and you have a lot of developers who have a high skill set, and over time they've created things that weren't initially even like an initial use case for Ethereum, right? And you've seen those come over time. So, it's a slow boogie. You're always going to see developers slowly build. And remember, there's going to be permissioned and permissionless applications. So there's going to be tools that people build that anyone can plug and play and use. And there's also going to be people who have a particular company they work for and they say, hey, we have this use case. We need this protocol to do this. We need to manage internal treasuries. We need to tokenize this. We want smart contracts that, do this very specific thing, but it needs to be a permission. We don't want anyone to be able to just access this. And you're going to pay developers to build that out, right? And there's always going to be testing on the networks when that's involved. There's going to be a lot of deployments when that happens, even if it's on a permission blockchain. So there's going to be a lot of use cases that even though you're going to see the activity going, you're not going to necessarily know each and every use case as it comes because permissioned applications do not have the obligation to share with you all of the sensitivity of what makes up their permission to sidechain essentially.
Yeah, that's a great wrap up there. That's actually a great beat to end on. I mean, I'm personally so excited with a lot of these crypto projects. I mean, I felt last year was sort of like the hump we had to get over before election. Like there was just a lot of things going on. Networks being halted, Casper, board transition. And so that was very difficult. It was also kind of a lull moment in the market leading up to that. And so it wasn't all that good, but we made it out on the other side. And now I love the development we're seeing in the projects we talk weekly about here, team. So it's looking super bullish right now. All you can do right now is really buy, to Matt's point earlier about buying, I used to be the guy that was taking out of, twice a month, a chunk of money and putting into Coinbase and DCing out of that. Now I'm just DCing right out of my bank account. Dan was just talking about inflation the other day, and he just reminded me just about how much things are picking up in price, how things are getting more expensive year over year. When we talk about inflation, the Fed's trying to get to their 2% target, but is inflation going up 2% year over year? No, it feels a lot more than that. It hits your pockets. And when you go to McDonald's, the grocery store, you interact with your daily life, everything feels like it gets more expensive. And you're still holding those dollars that you earned, a year or 2 years ago. And so I just, Matt, I was just like, I'm done. I'm just going to DCA straight out of my bank account. And, because this is going to make more sense over the long run. I'm going to make more money in crypto. I'm not going to make money with it sitting in my bank account and collecting their, what is it, like a penny earning
Right,
on a savings?
point zero
Something
one
stupid.
percent for savings, and that's a joke, especially considering that a lot of banks, have a service fee that they charge every month. So you're wiping out anything you could have made, in savings. So it's, I think we're going to see a very different model change, especially as a lot of stable coin yields come
Yeah.
online, and you have a lot of opportunity there. These banks are going to have competition, and they're going to look very stupid offering 0.1% when everyone's offering current market rate of 2, 3, 4, 5, depending on what's happening with treasury bonds.
Absolutely, Matt. All right, team, that's all we have for today. If you got something valuable, make sure you leave a like. And again, we're not going to be here on Monday. We will have all the shows next week on the website, so you can catch up there. And then we'll also have the Ask Matty show next Wednesday. So if you have any more questions, leave them in the comment section down below. If you guys have a lot of Casper questions, we might just do all Casper questions next week since, we got the 2.0 upgrade. I'm pretty sure we'll get some more news coming out of Casper this week as it relates to other projects coming onto Casper that were previously announced, and that now that 2.0 is on mainnet, how those projects will be interacting and how we can interact with them. So, team, thank you for joining us today. We will see you guys next week. Bye.